I know the future that I want for my little 9-week-old baby named Molly. And I know that's a future that you want for everyone. A future of hope, of happiness, of safety, of security, of opportunity, and a future of love. Today is about all of that and much more. So to get proceedings underway, would you please welcome Auntie Janice Page for a welcome to country.
Jingri, Baguyun, Turrbal Yagara Jagan. So hello, good afternoon, as we stand here on Turrbal and Yagara country. Now, I'm not from this area. I am a Mununjali woman. My name's Janice Page. I am with the traditional Mununjali elders in Beaudesert. It's our country up there. And I'm also Quandamooka Nunapple, which is from Stradbroke Island. And the Turrbal peoples, the traditional lands are from around Brisbane CBD area, and their bordering nations are Gubba Gubby, Waka Waka, Ndala, Nulgi and Moreton Island. And so that was where they shared their resources and their kinship. And so as we stand in this space and on this country, that we really do respectfully want to acknowledge the elders past, the caretakers of the land and the waterways, the resources, the custodians of the story, the kinships, the bloodlines. And I must say, they did leave the place in pretty good condition, hey? So let's acknowledge them and respect them today. We also respect in our culture the elders present and post-settlement for their endurance and their persistence and their standing staunch and never submitting and surrendering their spiritual connection to land and country and to each other. We acknowledge our emergent elders. They are very important to us. And we have some amazing young people coming forward now that we're living in a time where there's a really true, sincere effort and an interest through all the programs and the years of just persevering to keep going ahead and pushing forward something that is important to all of us. And as I say that, I want to say thank you to the Red Rose Foundation for the amazing work that you do, and it's very important to all cultures. As we know, domestic violence does not discriminate at all. And but you have the courage of people that never give up and keep pushing forward and coming together. So this is another form of friendship and sharing of stories and sharing of knowledge and hoping for a better future, and had to kill this and stop this stinking thing, and embracing the emerging elders that are coming on and educating them, because they're always a very important part of breaking the cycle. So we thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Auntie Janice. And just before you go, Auntie Janice, would you please accept a token of our appreciation as well from our Secretary, Di McLeod. Thank you very much. As Auntie Janice said, domestic violence does not discriminate. You will hear stories of great courage today, ladies and gentlemen, and they're the stories that we walk forward with as well. I'd like to acknowledge distinguished guests here today, the Attorney-General and Minister for Women and the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence, Shannon Fetterman, the Shadow Spokesperson for Domestic Violence, Amanda Cam. I see the Shadow Spokesperson for Health, Ros Bates, as well here today. Justice Margaret McMurdo, thank you very much for being here today. Of course, Justice McMurdo leads the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force. I would urge everyone to read the discussion paper that only came out today and make sure you put in a submission as well. Magistrate Linda Bradford Morgan, thank you very much for your support as well to the Red Rose Foundation. The State Coroner, Terry Ryan. The Deputy Commissioner for Corrective Services, Paul Stewart, thanks for being here, Paul. Acting Superintendent Ben Martain, who leads the Family, Violence and Vulnerable Persons Unit within the Queensland Police Service. Ben, thank you very much. Members of Parliament who join us today, first responders who are in the room as well, thank you for the work that you do. And I would like, if you could all acknowledge my fellow board members of the Red Rose Foundation, the ambassadors for the service and the volunteers who make our work possible. Would you please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. And to officially open the Red Rose Foundation's Strangulation Trauma Centre, which is not here in the Premier's Hall at Parliament House, but for obvious reasons of safety and security, this is where we have chosen to mark this special occasion. Would you please welcome to the microphone the Attorney-General of Queensland, Shannon Fentiman.
The Red Rose Foundation has a long and significant history advocating for the prevention of domestic and family violence in Queensland and also throughout the country. From its early days as the Queensland Domestic Violence Death Review Action Group to its present formation as an influential national organisation, the Foundation has achieved so much. And I would like to personally, on behalf of the Palaszczuk Government, thank the Red Rose Foundation for your significant contribution. Today is a culmination of the tireless work and dedication of Betty Taylor and the team at Red Rose to raise the issue of non-lethal strangulation and the unique and complex trauma that it causes. The Palaszczuk Government has and will continue to work hard to eliminate domestic and family violence. It was actually on my 12th day as a minister that I was handed the Not Now, Not Ever report from Quentin Bryce. And of course, over the subsequent years, we've worked hard to implement all of those 140 recommendations. And they include the establishment of the Independent Domestic and Family Violence Death Review and Advisory Board, something that I know Betty and Red Rose advocated for many years, as well as becoming the first state to introduce a standalone offence of strangulation. And of course today, as Craig has already told us, the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force, led by the Honourable Margaret McMurdo AC, has released their first discussion paper on how best to legislate against coercive control and whether or not we need to create a standalone offence of commit domestic violence. This is such a significant step forward in strengthening Queensland laws and really does show our commitment to keeping women safe and holding perpetrators to account. People with lived experience of coercive control, survivors, their family and friends, our hardworking frontline workers, so many of whom are in the room today, the sector and the wider community are encouraged to read the discussion paper and have their say on this very important issue. And while we have made significant progress to prevent and respond to assist women in Queensland, we know there is still so much work to be done. I want to congratulate the work of the task force, including Red Roses Foundation's very own Di McLeod, who is an important member and is here today. Already, we've had over 260 submissions. And I want to encourage each and every one of you here today to have your say, because it's through your voices and your advocacy that we can deliver that much needed change to help keep women and children safe. The tragic deaths of women are a reminder to all of us that we still need to do more. During the pandemic, we know that 1 in 10 Australian women in a relationship experience domestic and family violence, with 2/3 of them saying that violence started or became worse during the lockdowns. And in recent months, of course, we've seen a groundswell of women marching all over Australia saying enough is enough. Incredibly brave women like our Australian of the Year, Grace Tame, and Brittany Higgins, all coming forward with stories of harrowing and appalling assaults, coupled with years of not being seen, heard, listened to, or believed. And we've seen school students coming forward to talk about gendered violence that too many young women and girls are being subjected to. I'm really heartened that we are seeing this groundswell across the country. We have this momentum now for change, and don't worry, we are absolutely grabbing it and harnessing it, and we want to see this change right across our communities. The Domestic and Family Violence Death Review and Advisory Board has highlighted non-lethal strangulation as a significant high-risk factor for homicide. Strangulation was also associated with increased levels of sexual jealousy, an escalation of violence, and a victim's intuitive sense of fear of the perpetrator. We know that strangulation is also associated with a range of long-term health concerns, including respiratory difficulties, a heightened risk of stroke, as well as other major health impacts. The Red Rose Foundation and the establishment of the Australian Institute for Strangulation Prevention has done so much to raise awareness of these dangers. The importance of a greater understanding amongst our service system and first responders, as well within the broader Queensland community, about the lethality of strangulation and significant health consequences cannot be understated. Training frontline staff is absolutely crucial, and I want to again commend the work of the Foundation with the work that they've done with our frontline staff across the state, actually training them and teaching them about strangulation. And earlier this year, I was very pleased to announce almost $150,000 in funding for the Red Rose Foundation to help them continue the support services for victims of non-lethal strangulation and assist towards further research. You are an important support for so many survivors, a tool for frontline staff and incredible advocates. Thank you to the Red Rose Foundation for all that you do, and congratulations on today's opening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Really do appreciate it, and a token of our appreciation as well for being here to open the Red Rose Foundation Strangulation Trauma Centre. Really do appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, the work of the Red Rose Foundation has since its inception been led by Betty Taylor, our Managing Director. Betty has worked tirelessly over decades advocating and supporting domestic violence survivors and their families. She's been in the ears of government of all persuasions over many of those years to improve public policy and to achieve real action. She is rightly named a Queensland great, by the way, as well. Not just a great Queenslander, but a Queensland great. Her passion knows no bounds, and we wouldn't be here without her dedication to the cause. Really, this is her baby. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our Managing Director, Betty Taylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm here. A few weeks ago, I didn't know if I would be, but I'm here. So I'll just start by thanking Auntie Janice for that very warm welcome to country, and to the Minister and all our esteemed guests. But importantly, because of our work, there are special people here, and I acknowledge Sue and Lloyd Clark and Sonia Anderson, who've gone through the most horrific experience of losing their loved ones to domestic violence. And I think those instances is what drives us further. Also, there are women here who've lived with and survived strangulation. So this centre is just as much about you as us. So they say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step. We've had several small steps along the way, and I think today is a momentous one. But it's not the end of the journey, it's not the beginning, but it's us moving forward. It's sharing the journey. This all started many years ago when I went to the United States on a Churchill Fellowship and had the privilege of meeting the people in San Diego that started the Family Justice Centre model, a co-location of services responding to domestic and family violence. Casey Gwynn, who set that up, it was the first centre and I was there when it was opened, said, "The difference between delusion and vision is the number of people that see it." And he said, for many years I was delusional, and I think myself a bit like that. But I'm hoping now, hello Camille, come on darling, I think more and more people are seeing this vision. So where the background came from when I was in San Diego all those years ago, they were doing such tremendous work about strangulation. And they started to ask me, well, what do you do in Australia? And I said, well, I don't know. Women say they've been choked, but I don't know what else we could do. And they said, oh, Betty, you've got to do more than that. And I came home and started to talk to people, and that's where we started to get that momentum. So people have asked us why we would separate out strangulation. Isn't it just part of domestic violence? Why does it need a specialist response? And we said, well, the same reason that we have specialist response to sexual assault, to family law, to trauma counselling, to children's services, to women's shelters. We're all part of the solution, but some things need a specialist response. And I started my work in domestic violence back in the late 1980s, working in a women's shelter. And I still honour the women that went before us that started the first women's shelter in Sydney in 1974. And they had to claim squatters' rights on a derelict building in Glebe. I think the board's happy that I didn't have to break down doors and get squatters' rights. But now we have over 500 shelters across Australia, and that's my vision, that this keeps growing and growing beyond us. So we lobbied to get a strangulation standalone offence, and thank you to the government for doing that. What we thought that might be the end of our work, that the police would be out there charging everyone, we'd do some training, that charge, it'd go through the courts. We never saw ourselves initially as providing any direct client support work. But women started to come to us. They came to us through social media. They found their way to us through police and other mechanisms. And it's been a tremendous journey of learning with them. We formed a partnership with our colleagues at Central Queensland University and the Queensland Centre for Domestic Violence researcher who are here today. And I want to acknowledge them and the work they do, and that partnership is so invaluable. We have now completed the first part of our research, but there's so much more to do. But what we've discovered in it, that this goes well beyond that initial crisis response, that it goes well beyond what agencies can do in the limited time that a client might interact with them. That women that we're supporting are experiencing strangulation impact months and months and months later. They're experiencing blood clots to the brain, stroke. They're experiencing a whole raft of life-endangering injuries that may have not got picked up earlier. One of the women we support, a piece has broken off her hyoid bone 10 months later that didn't get picked up. And it could have been solely because pressure on the neck at the time put that pressure, weakened her bones. We don't know. We formed a partnership with the San Diego Hope Alliance, but also their training institute. It's a formal partnership. We've done this training several times. We've brought the expert trainers over here and we've been over there. We've learnt so much from them and we owe them so much. I don't know if people were following the trial of Derek Chauvin, who was recently convicted of the murder of George Floyd. If you look at that trial, and it's on YouTube, see the testimony of Dr. Bill Smock. Classic strangulation testimony, how you'll get a successful conviction. I believe Dr. Bill's testimony alone is probably what got that over the line. He is one of our medical advisors. We've learnt so much from him and he stays in touch with us. So through our work, we've learnt that domestic violence, yes, is probably one of the singlest high-risk factors for death. 750% more likely to be killed by their partner. But we've also learned it's not just high risk, it's high harm. Long after their partners have left the scene, women might be in safe, secure accommodation and they think they're safe, but some have a time bomb within them. And we don't know how many women have died well after the fact. We talk about one woman a week killed. We're now talking about women who died because we don't know. We also know that, we need to know more to do more. So we're taking our training out into all sorts of communities. We're taking them into hospital ED departments. And a recent training in quite a big hospital ED department, the doctor said to me, "I've learnt so much today, thank you. I don't know how many of these cases we've missed, where women turn up at ED with no visible injuries." People may have heard of us, and I could talk all day about our red benches, but I won't. We started the red benches as a way of getting community awareness way out across Queensland. We're so proud that now we have red benches on Mornington Island and Doomadgee and Bamaga and all these remote communities. But what it's also allowed to do, Tanya, who's here today as our operations manager, Tanya's great in saying to people, "I'll give you a 2-for-1. We'll come and launch a red bench, but we've got to do training while we're there." And so she recently did training, and the result, I just want to share with you the result of what that training can be. And this is from a police officer who really did that training, said, "I'm sending you through my first referral." And he talks about a woman who was put in a sleeper hold, and as a result there was no injuries visible. She attended a hospital who didn't conduct any tests or scans and sent her home. That officer followed up and sent this to us. "She's still suffering severe headaches to the front of her head, around her eyes, around the back of her ears, brain fog, husky voice, pain when swallowing, eating, and of course, trouble sleeping and anxiety." What a well-documented referral. But he also went on to say 2 things. Would we make contact with that woman? She was outside the southeast Queensland. And we did. We've made telephone contact with her, and with the money that we're getting, we're running strangulation prevention, support groups at the centre, but we're starting them online, and she will be joining our online group that we're going to open up for people across Queensland who can't get to specialised support. But she also asked for some written documentation on strangulation that she might take back to the hospital. So that's the type of work we want to do, and that's how we want to involve our partners. Our partners in QPS, in Queensland Ambulance, community corrections we're getting referrals from, our hospitals, forming partnerships with places like the Stroke Foundation and the Brain Injury Foundation, the disability sector. When people come to us, we want to recognise 2 things. Yes, you are at high risk of your partner, but you're also high harm for what's going on for you. And the quicker we can get people to get the right testing and support, we can turn this around. Another woman who had been in contact with us for quite a while from strangulation presented at a Brisbane ED department relatively late at night. Slurred speech and dizziness. She was asked what drugs she was on. She's trying to tell them, "I'm not on drugs." They insisted they drug test her. In desperation, she rang one of our team, who was then able to speak to the nursing staff. She was stroking. So the more we can get this out there, that women might sound, they're not walking around with broken bones, they're upright. So in the high harm in homicide prevention, strangulation's one of them. But keep in mind what I call the deadly S, and the deadly S is the basis of our training. Separation, when women leave, their partners go into that toxic sexual jealousy. If I can't have you, no one else is. Sexual violence in all its forms. And stalking, along with strangulation, the deadly S. And if we can get a grip on how we respond to some of those high risk, we often look at high risk in terms of the behaviour of, perpetrators, but I don't think we're doing enough to assess for dangerousness, which is quite different. I won't take more time, but I just really want to thank everyone that's come on this journey with us. It is a journey. We will be doing a lot more research. We will be, laying out further plans as we go ahead. One of the things that we do have into government, Shannon, is we are looking for funding. I don't like using the word pilot program as such, but I am using it for this. We want to, for a year, look at what we're doing. This has never been done before. Queensland did the first legislation, now we're doing the first Strangulation Trauma Centre. We've got to know what works, and often research and evaluation comes at the end of a project, if it's even done at all. We want this written in at the beginning. We want to know from day one, what are we doing, what's working, what are victims telling us, and we want this to go right through. So that partnership is important. We want to document best practice. People are looking to us. People want us to be able to share what we're doing, but we have to know what it is and what we're doing. So that's me for today, but I just want to invite you on the journey with us. To all the women that are here and beyond that have stepped forward to share their experiences and come with us on this journey, thank you. And thank you to the board of the Red Rose Foundation. And just one another thing, we couldn't have established that trauma centre. It's a place of peace. It's a beautiful environment. The women love it. But everything there was donated. Thank you to McCall sitting there from Rise Up, which is, one of our main groups that helped us set it up. We run on the smell of an oily rag, so please, if people want to donate and come and support us, we'd love to hear from you. But thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, the stories of survivors are something to be celebrated because they can also change what happens next. And I want to introduce you to someone who knows the trauma we speak of all too well. Christy Smith is a survivor. Christy Smith has a voice, and I want you to hear it. So please, would you welcome Christy Smith to the microphone.
I'm more nervous now. So my name's Christy Smith. What defines me as a person is this. I'm a mum of 5 kids, ranging between 19 and 6. I'm a treasured wife to my beautiful husband, and I'm a domestic violence and family law lawyer and a sessional member of QCAT since 2017. I'm also a survivor of horrific domestic violence that almost claimed my life on a number of occasions, including strangulation, broken bones, rape, and coercive control. Going back to what Betty was saying earlier, with the after effects of a strangulation that you might not understand are actually the effects of that strangulation. Just now, reflecting on that, I realised that is why I had trouble swallowing for 3 years. I couldn't eat food that, for example, steak. I ended up in hospital about a year after the initial strangulation, and that was with a suspected stroke. I was able to escape my abuser for the final time 5.5 years ago when he broke my ribs punching me on holiday in Bali, when he stole my passport, my money and my phone, and he left me in a third world country injured. With limited consular help, the generosity of my friends and strangers, I was able to get home after 3 days to collect my youngest daughter while the perpetrator was at work and collect some clothes. I got home on my daughter's first birthday. I walked away with nothing, and this would be the final time I would escape. The other 3 times were not successful. Unfortunately, as most of us know, the abuse doesn't stop after you escape, the threat doesn't stop, and the fear doesn't stop. And today I want to share some of my experience to highlight the barriers we as victims face when dealing with the justice system, or legal system rather. A system that I work in and have to uphold, yet got no real relief from for a number of years. So as I stand before you, I might not seem like your typical domestic violence survivor. We tend to expect domestic victims to look or act a certain way, for example, but this can happen to anyone. I was a barrister for 9 years. I helped perpetrators of domestic violence and victims. I ran family court trials, I ran jury trials, and I would go home to my own abuse. I felt like a failure and a fraud as a lawyer. After I escaped, it took 5.5 years for some semblance of justice to be served. 5.5 years between reporting the offences to police until the sentence date, which was last month. And it was only last month that the perpetrator of these crimes was sentenced to 7 years jail. This part may be quite triggering for some people who've been through domestic violence, so I invite you to leave at this point of my speech because it does talk of sexual assault and physical violence. The objectively worst incidents that happened to me were when I was strangled unconscious, and the second was when I was assaulted and then tied to a bed and raped. In my own home, I told a man to leave. He just so happened to be my partner at the time. He was making me feel unsafe. It wasn't an irregular occurrence, but instead of leaving, he pushed me down and pinned my arms down with his knees and began punching me full force in the face. I lost consciousness after 10 punches. I awoke to a splitting headache, a broken cheekbone, and major facial swelling. I was denied medical treatment and told to go to bed, and I complied. I've recently learned about the appeasement response, and that's certainly part of my experience. I was then tied to a bed, tortured and raped for hours in the most degrading way you might imagine, including having faeces and blood smeared into my mouth until I vomited. I didn't think I would make it through the night. He'd gone too far. I thought, for sure, I'm not going to wake up in the morning. I did, and I'm standing here today as a survivor. This event happened a month before our holiday in Bali, before my final escape. I stayed because I was absolutely petrified. When I got back from Bali, a month after this event, I attended police to have my domestic violence order varied to no contact. And that was at the insistence of my friends who were then being threatened. I just wanted to move on and have a peaceful life. Wasn't going to happen for me. That DVO had already been in place for a year after he dragged me through my house by my hair, and my brave then 13-year-old daughter ran next door and called the police. Thankfully, my children didn't live full-time with me, so they were shielded from the majority of the super violent assaults that I experienced, but obviously they picked up on a lot. When I attended police, purely for the purpose of having the DVO extended, I began telling them why I needed the order changed, and the junior officer said, "This is way outside my pay grade," and that's when the detectives came to talk to me. And it was only then that I realised that he needed to be held accountable, that no other woman should ever experience this at his hands, and that that was my responsibility. It is also when the failings of the systems began for me. I wrote my own statement and gave police diary entries from the time of the relationship. They had lost the diaries by the time the trial rolled around. It took 5 months from the date of my report for police to execute a search warrant. So my stolen phone was in my perpetrator's possession with evidence on it that would have proven a number of other charges. It was long gone after 5 months. I was told by detectives just before the search warrant was executed that they were going to be going and doing that, and that he would not be being charged with my rape because it's he said, she said. I had medical evidence. Half an hour later, I got a call back saying that he was in fact being charged because he had deleted some messages 4 days after the incident happened. So it was like a consciousness of guilt type situation. Police failed to get witness statements from key witnesses until 3 or 4 years after the charges were laid. And of course, we all know memories fade. Police failed to notify witnesses of trial dates or ask me of my availability. One of my witnesses was going on her honeymoon. I had to keep chasing up the DPP to chase up the police over the last 5.5 years. And it's because I have the legal knowledge to know that this is what's supposed to be happening at every step. So I'm very privileged that I know what should happen, but also it's traumatising having to run, essentially, your own prosecution. Police laughed at me one night when I called 000 about 2 weeks after I escaped, when I was threatened with a gun over text. And the junior officers just laughed in my face and said, "What do you want us to do, put a car outside your house all night?" And I was almost arrested that night myself when I said, "This is going to be Exhibit 1 to the inquest into my death." And my friend, who was also a lawyer, said, "Walk away now." So I did. But here is the kicker. After 18 months in hiding, police gave my home address to my abuser. My own family didn't know where I lived. So as a result, I lost my work as a barrister because I couldn't have my daughter in daycare. I ended up living in a tent for a little while in the middle of winter with a 2-year-old child. I was homeless for 3 months, and it took 18 months to get an official apology from police. I was offered witness protection, but I couldn't do that because I couldn't take my 4 older children because they have their dad, who obviously didn't want to go into witness protection for his own reasons. But I didn't sit idle. I lived in women's refuges, tents, relied on the charity of friends, and I applied to become a sessional member of QCAP, and I wrote my application on a refuge computer, and I was successful. So I became a sessional member in 2017. And I was really angry at being offered witness protection because why should I have to hide? Why doesn't he have to hide? Why does he have bail? Why do I have to be in fear? And he remained on bail for 5.5 years despite multiple breaches. Breaches include chasing me down the highway with me calling 000, telling them I was racing to the nearest police station. Please have police waiting outside. I will not make it inside this police station alive. Thankfully, my name was red flagged on the system and they believed what I was saying. They could hear the panic in my voice. I pulled my car up to the police station. Police were waiting outside for me and I got out and I ran. He stopped his car after me, got out and ran after me into a police station. He was on bail to have no contact and he had a domestic violence order with no contact and a condition that he's not allowed to come within 100 metres of me. So he ran into a police station after me. Let that sink in for a second. He ran after a rape victim while he was on bail and was arrested in a police station. He got bail the next day. No one told me, so no wonder I was terrified. In 2018, I realised my DVO was expiring the next day. I was on a training course to transition from being at the bar to being a solicitor and opening my own firm. So I attended the Roma Street Police Station and asked them to apply to vary my domestic violence order to extend it. And they said no. And I was quite taken aback and I said, yes. And they said, we can print the forms for you and you can do it yourself and go and file it tomorrow. And I said, I'm not doing that because I'm on a training course. I can't do that. And they said, well, we don't have the authority to do this for you. And I said, I'm not leaving this station until you do this and I will sit here all night until you do it. And of course, they kept going with, we don't have authorisation to help with domestic violence orders, which I knew to be rubbish. I said, do your damn job and get approval. I told them to look up the charges that this man was facing. They then agreed, but still had to call the sergeant at his home to get approval to help me that night. So imagine for a moment being someone less assertive than me, without the legal knowledge that I have, trying to get help for the first time or only time and being told, do it yourself. It infuriates me. I hear it every day from my clients. We only have so many chances. Maybe that was the only chance a victim had to attend a police station to get help, and they're being turned away. So after 5 years of delay with my abuser, I took 3 months away from my law practice to ensure that I was emotionally ready for trial. I did Reiki and meditation, all of those sort of things to make sure I was emotionally healthy for what was to come. I was a defence barrister. I knew what was coming. On day one of the trial, after 5 years of waiting, negotiations began, as they often do. And the DPP was substituting rape, torture and deprivation of liberty for sexual assault. I cried, I begged, I reasoned. I said I'd rather go to trial and get a not guilty verdict than to have my voice stolen from me yet again. I asked if they could at least keep the schedule of facts the same, and they agreed to push that, and they did, to their credit. So the schedule of facts still reads the same, just with obviously the penetration part taken out. So after all of the delay, he finally pleaded guilty to tying me to a bed, assaulting me and sexually abusing me, to strangling me and 19 other charges. And finally, I felt light as a feather after seeing him say guilty over and over and over and over again in front of his parents and his brother. So my part was done. I held on to those memories for 5 years. I couldn't begin my healing until I could leave those memories at the court door. And that was in December. So I would like you all to think for a moment about what I just told you happened to me. Imagine that that was a stranger who assaulted me in my own home, viciously raped me and tied me to a bed for hours, chased me to a police station. The outcome would be so different. There would be no bail. A violent offender like that would not get bail if this happened to a stranger. But because he was my partner, my life and safety appear to be worth less, and that needs to change. I understand that Rev Rose is calling for the establishment of the Office of a Domestic Violence Commissioner to be a point of reference for the any systemic failings. As Rev Rose say, there are external complaints and review mechanisms for so many other industries, but nothing for DV and sexual assault. We need this. We need that accountability. We need transparency when police fail to act, when another organisation fails to act. We need to be able to hold people to account when there are failings. At most right now, what do? Go to the officer in charge? And that just doesn't work. So the last 8 years have been nightmarish, for the most part. The stuff of horror films. I want change to happen. And let's start by believing victims. Stop turning them away at the front counter of the police station. Start listening. It's really not hard. Triage domestic violence above stolen bicycles. I had anecdotally my ex-husband attend to to go and give a statement about a stolen fridge that somebody else had stolen, and there was a lady at the front desk crying with a baby, saying that her ex was threatening to release intimate images of her, and they told her to go away, but then spent an hour with my ex-husband talking to him about a $200 refrigerator. So after all of that, I want to end on a positive note. I did survive. I'm standing here. I have thrived. I've faced many struggles along the way. I'm not going to lie at all about that. There are days where I couldn't get out of bed. And I have a lovely counsellor. I see a psychologist and a psychiatrist to get me through that PTSD that comes with being in a relationship where you are abused every day. But like one of those kind of echo-inflatable punching clown toys, you can keep hitting me, but I'm not going to stay down for long. I'm truly happy with my life now. I have a beautiful, supportive husband sitting in the front row there. We have a gorgeous family. I have a thriving law firm. And I have this in spite of my experiences. But I now want to use those experiences to help others. Funnily enough, I was checking my Facebook today while waiting, and one of my memories popped up, and it was a dream that I had where my late nan had visited me. And I was upset in this dream and asking why so much was happening to me, and it was so unfair, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And in my dream, she said to me, the only thing that can defeat evil is goodness, and maybe the reason you have to deal with so much evil is because you are good, which means you will triumph. And I feel very triumphant today. Congratulations, Betty and the Red Rose team. You're all amazing, and I'm so proud of you, and you are part of the good that we need in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank Christy Smith again for having the strength to be here and to share her story. And with a voice like Christy's, that is what trying to achieve change is all about. At the Red Rose Foundation, we've worked in partnership with police over many years, and particularly the work that Betty has done on the front line, Tanya's doing at the moment as well. And so I'd like to welcome Acting Superintendent Ben Martain to the microphone. And just as Ben comes up, I saw a stat the other day that police receive 107,000 domestic violence calls. That was in 2020. 107,000. That is 290 a day. That is one every 5 minutes. Just let that sink in. And then the work that Ben and his team do at the Family Violence and Vulnerable Persons Unit starts to become clear as to how important that is. So ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Acting Superintendent Ben Martain.
Thank you, Craig, for that warm welcome. I'd firstly like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge the Attorney-General, other parliamentary members, other distinguished guests, Ms McMurdo, and most importantly, victims, survivors of domestic and family violence and their members. Christy, can I say thank you for sharing your story in such a candid way. What you described is not acceptable service, and we as police and as the system, we must learn to do better. But I want to highlight the important role that police officers can play in responding and preventing and disrupting domestic and family violence every single day. My team and I, we see very candid examples of police saving people's lives. And I want members of the public to know that they can come forward and they should feel comfortable in speaking to police about domestic and family violence, because we can help. We can work in with great organisations like Red Rose to change their lives, to make their lives much easier. To that end, to the Red Rose, in particular the CEO, Betty Taylor, on behalf of Commissioner Carroll and our Domestic and Family Violence Champion, Deputy Commissioner Linford, thank you for your warm welcome here today. Thank you again for what you do for our communities and your efforts in ending domestic and family violence in our communities. The wonderful Strangulation Trauma Centre, to which I have had the privilege of visiting, is just yet another example of the Foundation's commitment to supporting women who have experienced these horrific acts of violence. In the last financial reporting year, across the state, we investigated 989 non-lethal strangulation offences. Sadly, to date, we have already surpassed this number. And based on the current trajectory of reporting, we are on track for 11% increase in reports of strangulation this year. But as we all know, there are many more acts of strangulation that go unreported to police. and we must bring these acts to light. We must help members of the community. To that end, the prevention and disruption of these offences from occurring in the first place and addressing all other forms of domestic and family violence is an absolute priority of the Queensland Police Service. Through our dedicated Domestic and Family Violence and Vulnerable Persons Command, at this very moment we have specialist officers across the state engaged in Operation Tango Lesser. This operation is using a machine learning actual aerial tool to help officers target and disrupt the very high risk, high harm perpetrators who engage in these types of offences. This operation involves our officers undertaking regular home visits to these perpetrators, proactively enforcing protection orders and engaging with support service agencies to provide victims and offenders with access to support services. In terms of our investigative response to strangulation offences, our officers are being trained in pre-recording of victim video statements to capture the best evidence for presentation to courts. This is particularly crucial when we know from academia and medical experts who have both worked with the Red Rose Foundation and police that many victims, due to their injuries, suffer difficulties with memory recall and giving evidence in court. We are earnestly working with partner agencies to progress a suite of initiatives to reduce the trauma of victims when giving evidence before courts and to safeguard the legal disclosure misuse of these video statements by perpetrators. It's crucially important for members of my team and I to be here today to support the opening of the Strangulation Trauma Centre. For whilst at law, the Queensland Police Service is ultimately responsible for maintaining the security and safety of all of our members of the community, this is a responsibility that we are not able to discharge on our own. It is a responsibility that can only be fulfilled working collaboratively with community members and key government and non-government organisations. This collegiate approach, through the continued collaboration between the Red Rose Foundation and the Queensland Police Service, has been happening for many, many years. The Red Rose Foundation commitment to raising awareness of non-lethal strangulation and the provision of expert training to officers working in the fields of investigations, forensics, prosecutions and within vulnerable persons policing has been pivotal in shaping the policing response to this heinous crime. I again thank the Red Rose Foundation for your incredible support, as do I thank the other domestic and family violence support agencies that are in the room today. Thank you for the enormously challenging work that you do. You make a difference day in, day out. We see it constantly. It's my privilege to be invited here, Betty, and I wish you the best of luck with the centre, and I look forward to visiting again soon.
Thank you, Ben.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the microphone, as a formal thank you for your attendance today at the opening of Australia's first Strangulation Trauma Centre, the chairperson, I mean to say, of the Red Rose Foundation, Kelly Martin.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Kelly Martin. I'm the chair of the Red Rose Foundation. I've had the pleasure of being on the board of the Red Rose Foundation for the past 3 years, and the last 18 months I've been the chair. There's a couple of people that I need to thank today, one who isn't here. Earlier this year, we received the resignation of a long-standing member of the board, Diane Mangan. She has been a pioneer, as has Betty, against in helping us change the ending for domestic violence victims in Queensland. She can't be with us today. I think with the borders opening, she's taken every opportunity to get back to see her family in New Zealand. But we really want to thank her for her service on the board and everything that she's done for victims and to help change the ending here in Queensland. So if everyone could give a round of applause for Diane. Thank you to my dear friend and colleague, Christy, for telling your story, and I'm so happy that you're able to do that now and have that voice. I too am a family and domestic violence lawyer. I work with Christy in that space, and it's been a long journey for her. I know that personally, so thank you again for telling your story today. It's been such a tremendous journey, and Again, had the pleasure of travelling it with Betty and the other members of the board to get here today, and without her belief and driving force behind this, I don't think we would be here. And I know we've thanked Betty a number of times today, but I need to do it again for one last time, so thank you, Betty. My last thank you, apart from thanking you all for being here, is to Sonia Anderson, because I wouldn't have even thought about being on this board if I hadn't heard Sonia speak at the first Red Rose event that I went to. And she really changed my mind in the direction of not just working in the sector, but really volunteering my time in the sector as much as I do. And I'm really grateful for her, and I'm so treasured to have such a great friendship with her as well. So thank you, Sonia.
A huge thank you for being here and for joining that conversation and for making a commitment, because just by walking through that door, you're saying that you want to change the ending as well. So let's let that be our final message this afternoon here, and congratulations again to Betty and the rest of the Red Rose team for the opening of the Strangulation Trauma Centre. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great afternoon.